Hello, I'm Ed Needham, editor of the fabulous literary magazine Strong Words, and this is my podcast, The 5 Rules of Writing. In each episode, I speak to a most excellent writer in a particular genre about how they do it. And if you'd like to know more about Strong Words, and specifically how to subscribe, go to www.strong-words.co.uk and you'll be whisked straight to the website. So hello, welcome to the 5 Rules of Writing. Now, this is a podcast where I talk to writers about the 5 things they know to be true about writing, whatever it is that they write for a living. So whether that's romantic sagas or the lyrics to heavy metal ballads, there are some aspects of their work that are absolutely non-negotiable. And today, I'd like to welcome a great and prolific novelist in not one but 2 genres, my good friend Tammy Cohen. Hello, Tammy.
Hi, Ed. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for joining me. Now, before we get onto your 5 rules, most people find it hard enough to produce any sort of novel, yet you write them as 2 people. Tell us about that.
I do write as 2 people. I started off writing what was called dark women's fiction. Under the name Tammy Cohen, which is my real name. And I think the publishers thought that would give me more gravitas than Tammy, but they were wrong. So I did 3 books under that name, and then the booksellers decided that no one could pronounce Tamar, so it was decided I would be Tammy Cohen. So I wrote a few psychological thrillers under Tammy Cohen, and then I don't know. I wanted to write something else. I wanted I wanted to be able to branch out a bit more than the psychological thrillers I was doing, and decided to try my hand at writing historical fiction. And so I needed a new name for that, because Tammy Cohen wouldn't cut the mustard as a historical fiction writer. So Rachel Rhys was born, and I've written 3 Rachel Rhys historical fiction.
Okay, it's hugely impressive. I mean, do you do first one and you go from the first word and you write it to the end and then finish it and then you switch to the other, or is it kind of psychological thriller in the morning, historical drama in the afternoon, and then champagne and deep thoughts?
Always champagne. It's like Barbara Cartland round at my house. I'm laid out on my purple chaise longue.
Lots of chiffon.
And a little fluffy dog. No, that's not how I write. My brain cannot encompass that at all. I have to do 1 book from start to finish and then start another one. And I find it quite tricky when, like this week, I was in the middle of writing the next Rachel Rhys, and then I got the copy edits in for the last psychological thriller, so I had to drop the Rachel Rhys to do the copy edits, and I now am completely out of the zone for doing the Rachel Rhys. It's going to take quite a while to get back into that. So my brain cannot work that way.
And are they both as demanding as each other, or do you kind of sort of very much prefer being one person to the other?
I prefer being the one that I'm not at this present moment. So when I'm writing historical fiction, I'm just thinking, isn't it brilliant when you don't have to keep stopping every other word to kind of check the etymology of this word, or look up this fact or that fact, and I can just write the psychological thrillers and it's all contemporary. I don't have to do any research. And then when I'm writing the contemporary, it's always like, I would love to be able to be a bit more flowery at this point, and a bit more, and go off to Cuba or the Riviera and do a bit of research. And so yes, I have FOMO of whichever pseudonym or writing hat I haven't got on at that point.
I can certainly see the appeal of the Riviera. Causing all sorts of trouble for you. But what sort of prompted you in the first place to sort of embark on the steep and lonely path of the novelist?
Well, I always wanted to write novels. Always. I never. The strange fact is, it took me till I was 47 to do it. although that's not through want of trying. I did start a lot of novels over the years, many, many, many novels over the years, but I didn't have any discipline or any motivation. You know, it's such a lonely thing. It's such a long slog writing 100,000 words. You have to have something driving you through it, like a burning idea or a conviction that this is the book you're meant to write, or now I've got a deadline and a contract. But when you're just starting and you don't have that, it's really hard to keep going. And so I would start, and also I never planned them out, so I never knew what was going to happen in the end. So I would get to 10,000 words and it would all kind of collapse, and I just I didn't have the self-belief, I think it was probably, to go through with it.
So was there a point when you thought, I can do this? No,
I still haven't reached that point. Every single time I feel I can't do this, and it feels like a miracle when it gets done. But no, the first book, when I thought I knew I could complete it, that was the first book, The Mistress's Revenge, and in order to get to that stage where I knew I could complete a book, I had to get past the first 10,000 words stage. So I sent the 10,000 words to an agent, my agent now, Felicity Blunt at Curtis Brown, and she actually called me in and said, I think it could have potential. But obviously you've got to go back and write the next 90,000 words now. But it was just that bit of encouragement with someone else having a belief that gave me the belief and the confidence to see it through to the end.
From Strong Words magazine, these are the 5 rules of writing. Okay, so tell me your first rule, Tammy.
Well, first of all, I have to say that I don't have any rules in this, and you've made me come up with this list of rules.
You do, you just didn't realise it.
Right. Okay, no, I do. So I've been trying very hard to think of my list of rules. Mm-hmm. And my first rule is, it's about perfection. My first rule is about do not expect perfection, and always understand that great perfect idea that comes to you fully formed in the bath or on your dog walk, this amazing opus that you're going to produce, you will never produce it. When you start writing, the instant you put pen to paper or get on the keyboard, the slow disintegration of your great grand perfect idea begins, and it's, some people can't come to terms with that at all, and some people spend the whole of their draft and draft after draft chasing this elusive perfect idea that they had in their head, knowing that what they're producing is not it. But so my first rule is just accept it. You know, it was Iris Murdoch that says every book is the wreck of a perfect idea, and I think you have to accept it. I mean, that was Iris Murdoch. She produced amazing books, but her books were still the wreckage of a perfect idea. And I think the sooner you come to terms with that, the better.
Okay, now it sounds a little bit as though you might have come to this conclusion from bitter experience. Is that the case?
Many bitter experiences, yes. many bitter experiences. But yes, every book you feel like it's going to be this grand thing. I think not so much the first one. The first book that I wrote, it was a different thing. It just came to me. I didn't have any pressure. I wasn't kind of trying to make a point or to prove anything, because I didn't have a contract at that point. But the second book, which I did have a contract for, I came up with some very grandiose idea of this great comedy of manners that I was going to do in a la Jane Austen, with all these philosophical little observations, and it was going to be telling all these truths about betrayal and about love and revenge, and so it was massively long, and it was overblown, and and it had not really any structure. And I gave it in, and my lovely editor, took me out to lunch, and she said, "I'm afraid this is unpublishable." And after I'd stopped crying and weeping, I realised that she was absolutely right. And
did the table go over?
No, it was 2 days before Christmas. It was a very gloomy Christmas. but she was absolutely right. It wasn't good, and this perfect idea that I'd been chasing just didn't exist. And I went back and I completely rewrote it, and it worked much better. But every book. You have this idea. You have it, like with the book that I've just written, the Rachel Rhys, about was set in Cuba, and I had this absolutely knew the atmosphere I was going for. That it was in the 1950s, and there was all that seediness, but also the glamour and the mafia and the sultriness, the music, everything. You wanted that whole feel. And I just couldn't get it as I was writing. And it was worse after I'd been to Cuba to research it. I realised I just hadn't got it. I just couldn't quite capture it. And it made me stuck for quite a long time. After I came back from Cuba, I think I had about 3 months where I didn't write a word, because the reality of what I'd written before I went was so different to this perfect atmosphere I wanted to capture. But you just have to get on with it and just accept it. Perfection is not possible.
Okay. And you were saying, just yesterday you were still making edits against the clock. Were you sort of surprised when you started out that this is what writing novels actually looks like? It feels like the enemy of creativity in a way. You just got to get it done, and then at the end of the day, it's finished, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, well, it's dead. I mean, I came like you from journalism, and I think that helped a lot with this kind of being able to jettison the idea of perfection, because as a journalist, you're always up against the deadline. You've always got to hand it in, whatever shape it's in. It's got to go, because they need to publish it. And so you get used to giving something in that isn't perfect. You don't have the time to tinker around and hone it. You just got to accept this idea that it's not going to be perfect.
Okay. And you also gave me this, sent this great quote over from Sadie Jones. You said, you imagine a cathedral and on the page it's a garden shed.
Yes, isn't that perfect? That's so just perfect.
If it's a mistake to sort of envisage this great baroque creation before you've even written the first word, what does the sort of germ of a good idea look like?
I think it's an idea that you kind of feel. To me, it's something that that excites some kind of feeling in you. I don't know, a heart. I was reading something. Interview with Elizabeth Strout, and she said that she writes in snatches, and she has the heart when she can feel a heartbeat of a scene, and it's a feeling. It's something that makes you that talks to something in you, that you think you've got something to say and that you want to say it.
Okay. What about your second rule, Tammy?
My second rule. I'm trying to read it off the screen. It's about authenticity. I think people have to feel like this is an authentic book, that the characters are acting in an authentic way. I think, even if you're writing a work of great imagination and fantasy, it has to be authentic. And even more so if you're if you're making it fantastical, it has to be, people have to recognize it and understand it. I think there's two parts to authenticity. There's writing detail. I think often authenticity sits in the small details that you, as a reader, you can understand. I mean, to go back to Elizabeth Strout again, her books, they stand and fall by these tiny little details that she puts in, that as a reader you understand, makes you understand that character and understand the emotions they're going through. That she'll have a character see a red scarf on the floor, and a child dropped a red scarf, and it will trigger something in this character's head that reveals to them that that she was a bad mother, or that she could have done better, or I don't know. So it's the little details that make something authentic, it's also the universals, the universal kind of emotions. If people are solipsistic when they read, they want to see, is this how I would react? How does this talk to me and my experience? And I think that doesn't mean to say you have to have empathy with the characters or like the characters, but you have to recognize the way in which they react in a situation, or the emotions that they have.
And you mentioned when you were writing your book about Cuba that suddenly you just ran into a brick wall. Was that a problem of authenticity, that you just couldn't work out what rang true for them?
Yes, I think yes, in a way it was, and it was about that particular character. I think it was an English ingenue going to this world and being thrown into it, and I don't think I'd got her quite right. I think it was. It's a hard. You know it when you haven't got it right. You can feel. You feel that something's not working, and you know it as a reader when you read something and you think that doesn't have integrity. That isn't how that character would react. How any character would react. I think it's about recognition and.
Right. So I wrote about Hilary Mantel recently in Wolf Hall, and about how she had exactly the same problem, although she was writing about real historical figures against a real historical backdrop, as opposed to imaginary historical figures against a real historical backdrop. But she said, the solution lay in, we know that Anne Boleyn is going to get her head chopped off, and but she doesn't, and so that was kind of the key to it for her. Instead of looking at it from the perspective of the history book and knowing how it all turns out, she had to get into the head of somebody who didn't know that Henry VIII was going to have several wives after her, and didn't know that he'd sent for a special swordsman to chop her head off even before they started the trial, and this kind of thing. So I thought that was very illuminating, really. That people can't see, people only have the perspective of the present, not the future. Anyway, how about number 3, Tammy? What's your third rule?
My third rule, as I looked at, is showing up. That is probably the most important rule, isn't it? You have to actually show up to get these things written down, and sometimes you just have no inclination and no desire and no inspiration, but you still just have to show up every day. And I was reading actually yesterday in the paper, there was an interview with a songwriter and a guy called Jeff Tweedy. I've never heard of him, and he was talking about this inspiration, and he's saying you can't wait for inspiration to strike. You have to put yourself in the way of inspiration. And he's saying in his field. You have you're writing a song, it can take 5 minutes, and people talk about like Dolly Parton writing 9 to 5 in the morning, and then I Will Always Love You in the afternoon, or some such thing. But that's almost as it makes you feel like she's walking along, and these things just come to her, and she writes them down in 5 minutes. But she's an incredibly hard-working person. She goes in every day. You have to put yourself, like as he says, in the way of the inspiration. You have to sit at your desk and turn on the computer or pick up a pen, write whatever comes into your head, write some words, do some like diagrams, whatever might put you in a position where if inspiration comes to you, you're ready and waiting to receive it. Yes. And if it doesn't come to you, you just write what you can. I mean, this year has just been awful for so many people trying to write during lockdown, and with all that's been going on in the world. And I think a lot of people have struggled to write at all, because anything you try and come up with is just, doesn't even light a candle to what's going on in the real world. And what's going on out there is so fantastical this whole year, where the entire planet has kind of ground to a halt and been in this state of stasis, however you pronounce it. It's just you couldn't make it up. So I know lots of people have struggled to write at all, and yet you still got the deadline. So during the first lockdown, I had to get a book in by June, a psychological thriller called The Wedding Party. So I was coming to my desk every day, but I had on the screen in the corner the kind of live feed from The Guardian, just going through with all these bizarre things happening all over the world. The airports closing, the streets completely empty. Everything was so strange. And so I had that on, and I was convinced that I wasn't actually making any progress on my book, because I was so obsessed with all the other things that were going on. But I would kind of like watch the news for 25 minutes, write for 5 minutes, do it again on repeat. But somehow by June I had a book.
Okay. Yeah, I think Jack London said, there's no point sitting around waiting for inspiration to strike. You've got to go after it with a club. And what's your technique then for getting started? Are you a sort of so many words per day? Are you a first word on the page by 9:01 a.m.? Do you have a method?
No, I show up. I sit at my desk.
Do your best.
I do my best. I try. What can you do? I try. I write. I try. We're going into my fourth rule now.
Okay, let's do rule 4.
We're venturing into my fourth rule with this whole thing of process. But yeah, it's the showing up. It's the showing up every day, and the writing something, no matter whether you don't feel inspired to write it. If you write 150 words today, it's 150 words you didn't have yesterday. You will get there.
And what is rule 4, Tammy?
Rule 4 is don't be pigeonholed into thinking you're this or that type of writer. And the subclause of rule 4 is don't think you have this one process, because to me every book has been a different process. And so the first bit is about being pigeonholed, and you will, as a writer, almost always your publisher will try and pigeonhole you. Well, first of all, your agent will, when they send out your book to publishers, they'll say, oh, this writer fits in this genre. I see them next to this person on the shelf. And then your publisher will fit you in a pigeonhole, and then the sales team will do that when they go to the retailers and say, this is the shelf you would put this person on. But at source, you as the writer I think it's very unhelpful to pigeonhole yourself as a particular type of writer. I think when my first job as a journalist was at Bella magazine back in the day, and I remember the commissioning editor there, I just had no clue really what I was doing, and the commissioning editor there said, it's really easy, all we're about is a good story well told. That's all you have to remember, a good story well told. And I think that's still the case. That's still writing books. You want a good story well told. That's what you want as a reader. And that's really what I want to do as a writer. And so it's not a good story well told with two twists in the middle and a reveal at the end. It's not, there are no kind of conventions. It's just a story. So I think you have to just set out to write the best story you can in the best way you can, and forget about the idea that you're supposed to be writing according to certain conventions.
Mm-hmm.
Because a book, most books you can push them into one genre or another at a later stage. My first book, The Mistress's Revenge, it was published here as dark women's fiction, but in some of the other territories that it was published, it was a psychological thriller. So I think a good story will cross genres, and I don't think that's our problem as writers to decide which one we're in.
Okay. What about number 5?
Yeah, number 5 is oh God, self-doubt. Yes. Well, I think we've touched on it already. This is my absolute specialist subject, which I'm very good on, self-doubt. I think, everybody has self-doubt as a writer, and I think the ones that don't are probably not very good. But I don't know whether you saw that Ian Rankin documentary about how, and it followed him over the course of writing one of his books. It was really, really good, really interesting. And there was a phase where he just believed that his book was like the worst book ever, and why was he writing it? And I think he calls it the fear. And everybody has it. You get to that stage where you just think, and usually your initial kind of excitement for the idea and for writing a new book will carry you over the first 10,000-20,000 words, but then after that this midpoint you start sliding into this abyss of thinking, why did I think this was a good idea? Why do I think I can write this book? Why do I think I'm a writer? All these things, and that's where it really helps to have a network of writer friends who you can ring up at these points and you know exactly what you're talking about.
So I was going to ask, after sort of, you've written a number of books now, but
yes.
So you must have developed some kind of strategy to cope with this voice telling you, well, this isn't very good.
Well, the first strategy is to have a contract and a deadline that you have to keep going even when the voice is saying that you're this isn't any good. The second strategy, like I say, is to have a network of other people that know exactly what you mean, and don't just say, oh no, you're really no, I'm sure you're really good, it'll be fine. People will just go, oh yes, no, I'm writing the worst book. My book's worse, in fact, than yours. You're vying to have the worst book. I think, and to know that all the greatest people suffered from self-doubt. I think it really helps to see things like the Ian Rankin thing. Know that it's not something that's just about you. It's everyone has it.
Mm-hmm. And how do you tell the difference between the voice that knows something needs to be better and the voice that only knows how to carp and sneer and undermine?
Yes, I'm good at the second one. I think having done it, having been through it several times now, I kind of know it is a process. It's a stage in the process that I will get through. Although to be honest, every time you get like the copy edit that I got yesterday of the book that I've written, I'm still going through just thinking, oh my God, this is, until it goes out there and people start saying nice things about it, all you've got is that voice saying, oh, are you sure about this? And oh dear. But you just have to believe that you've done it a few times in the past, we do it again. And you have to and the other trick is not to keep telling other people that you've written the worst book in the world. When I was first started out, my agent had to give me a real telling off, because she was just saying, can you stop telling people you write terrible books? And you've got to start bigging yourself up, because nobody else is going to do it for you.
Yes.
You've got to keep those niggling down. So now I try and keep them to myself.
Well, I bumped into her at Newbury Racecourse one year and introduced myself, and just about virtually the first. And I said, I'm a friend of Tammy Cohen's, and virtually the first thing she said was, would you have a word with her and tell her to start, stop undermining herself so much and have a bit more confidence. So
yes, well, I try to do that. Sorry for this.
And do you think, I certainly feel this doing Strong Words, my beautiful magazine, which is produced, several times a year. And I know, the idea is to sell it and for people to read it, but I still kind of feel as if I'm showing people my homework, do you think all writers feel like that? A bit?
It's a terribly personal thing that you're sending out in the world when you've sat on your own with a book for 100,000 words, for a year, 2 years, whatever it is, and it's yours. There's so much of you in it, and then you send it out to people. It's terrible. It's like it is like showing them your home. It's like showing them the inside workings of your mind, and then to have and knowing that people are going to give their opinions on it. It's awfully scary.
Most traumatic.
Yeah.
So what's next for you, Tammy?
Next, I am writing. So the copy edit I did yesterday was on my psychological thriller, The Wedding Party, which is out in May next year. And I'm working on the next Rachel Rhys, which is going to be set in a haunted castle in Florence in the 1920s.
Fantastic. That's brilliant, Tammy. Well, look, you've given people an awful lot of pleasure with all your fabulous books. And now that you've shared your 5 rules on how it's done, revealed your secrets, so everybody listening who's ever dreamt of being a novelist has no excuse for not getting started now. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. And
everyone else, if you've enjoyed our 5 Rules of Writing podcast, do come back again. And in the meantime, don't be shy about subscribing to Strong Words. Just Google Strong Words magazine and you'll be taken straight there. You won't regret it. Thank you so much. From Strong Words magazine, these are the 5 Rules of Writing.